Good morning. Sorry we're starting a little bit late, but that's on me. But we did have an emergency giant paraesophageal come in overnight, and that is one way to build an esophageal surgery center of excellence, is that you must say yes to every single phone call, every single doctor calling, and I'll go through kind of how we built that over the years. But I think you have to realize that if you're going to get referrals and you're going to build a center of excellence and it's starting with just you, then you're going to have to answer a lot of phone calls. And it's not unusual for me to be in Europe or to be traveling, going to the airport to get a call from our referral communication center. And I've never turned them down. They've used my recording as what they'd like to see every doctor saying, yes, thank you, more than happy to take the call. And then I get on the phone with the guy, yes, first of all, we'll take it. What do you got? And then as they explain, I don't sit there and chastise them. Why did you operate that guy? You really weren't qualified to do that. Why didn't you call sooner? Now I got to take your mess. I've never uttered those words in my life. I might say it to my colleague here about what should have been done and how it could have been done differently, never to the referring doc. And I'm not in the business of throwing them under the bus. If there's lawsuits that are going to be had, they won't be with me supporting them. I might tell a family it's not how I would have done it, but I don't know what their goal was and exactly what they did at the time. But that is one of the parts, one of the many parts of building a center of excellence, is to basically always say yes. And one of my mentors at Penn, Leonard Miller, told me early on in my career when I was chief at the VA, when I had built the largest service at the VA in the history of the Penn program, and he said, Jim, he said, you're going to be successful. He said, you have the 3 A's. I said, what do you mean? He said, you're available, you're affable, and you're quite able. And if you have all 3 of those, you're going to succeed. And by the way, I think it's very difficult to succeed on able only. You might think you're the best surgeon around. You might think that you can do things that others can't do. And that's great because you got to believe in yourself. And to believe in yourself, you got to put the time in. That's part of it, the training, the extensive work that you do. But to be that only and to not be very affable when that guy calls from Clarion or wherever, you've got to make him feel like his patient is important, and it should make him feel that way because they should be important to you. Your goal is to help the patient, regardless. Whether you're going to make money on that patient, I've never asked anyone other than my referral people about the insurance, or is it a Medicare patient, or is it a self-pay? I don't care. I don't care. I just want to get the patient here because I know that we can do a better job, my team can do a better job, my residents, my colleagues can do a better job than anybody in the world. So you have to have that belief, but that affability, transmitting that to others, is extremely important. So that affable, able, available, which means that phone call is easy to take at 8 a.m. Monday. It's not so easy when you're having a barbecue at 3 o'clock at your house and you got guests and your wife is high-signing you to get your butt back into the crowd and you're over there jawing it with a referring doctor. Well, guess what? You want what we have? I would recommend you do what I say. That's just my advice. And I've made some mistakes over the years, but it hasn't been on the 3 A's. We've always displayed the 3 A's. And we could probably stop the talk right there. Because if you do that in any line of business, I don't care what it is, you're likely to be successful. Now, it doesn't hurt to be in the right place at the right time. I had no idea 30 years ago that esophagus cancer was going to go on the rise. I mean, it was relatively a somewhat rare, unknown disease. Squamous cell cancer, it was a skid row disease. You weren't attracting wealthy patients or white-collar patients, but the rise in esophagus cancer didn't hurt our efforts to build an esophageal surgery of excellence, because along with that came all of the other problems with GERD and Barrett's, etc. So that rise has been 600% increase. Had I chosen mesothelioma to be my main disease of interest, we'd still be busy because very few people want to do it and can do that well. And there's room for us to grow in that area, but that's another talk. Some disclosures that I participate in, and a few years ago there would have been a lot more. I could have listed $20 million in grants we had at one time. At one point in time, $8 million from one industry called U.S. Surgical at the time, $3 million from Stryker, and multiple smaller grants that came to us not to support my salary, not for bricks and mortars. We negotiated that with the institution to use those grants for research, for salaries, for residents traveling, for education. Some of that was for CME courses or for the Angie Kanunins of the world that nobody wanted to pay for and or has a budget to pay for. You know, so you do need industry support, and I'm more than proud of that relationship, and I wish there were more. And some of my industry colleagues are here today, and they support these courses. And you have to develop relationships like that to go along with the 3 A's, because part of being affable, available, and able is learning from the rest of the world. We invite speakers in, like the Ginny Lytles or the Benny Wexlers of the world, that can come here and speak with authority on topics, and we learn from them. So it's always great to have that building your armamentarium at all times. Always be open for new technology, whether it's the links or it's a Torax. When photodynamic therapy became available in 1996, I went out, scheduled to go with my GI colleague who had called me, said, let's go take this course. There might be something there, and I'm thinking, really? We already have YAG laser? And I read the brochure, and it sounded a little hokey. And I said, okay, I'll go with you. I'm driving there. It was about 2 hours away. And he calls and says, you know, I got the flu. My kids are sick. I'm not going to go. I said, Richard, you're the one that taught me into going. He said, I know, but you'll be the main guy doing it. Well, a couple years later, Jenny wrote our paper on 215 phototherapy cases. And now we've done over 1,000, well over 1,000. And it's not anywhere near one of our big players in the business. Some of you haven't even seen us do a PDT case. Why? Because it's kind of waxed and waned in its appeal. We have stents now, we have other things. We still use it, and it still has a great niche. But at the same time, that notoriety of being the only one in the institution that could do PDT. Now there are half a dozen others that can do it, whether it's NetU or Argent or whoever. We can offer that at any point in time, and it still is a draw for some patients because it does work, along with the links or other things that are still finding their way to the fore. So these relationships with industry are, I think, essential, especially if you're an academic surgeon trying to find funds to support what you want to do. Not so easy to run a wet lab like we did yesterday without industry support. In fact, it's impossible. Now, disease-based therapy provide outstanding care for entire spectrum of esophageal diseases. Yes, we may love doing minimally invasive esophagectomies, but when I get a referral for a patient with a brain met and dysphagia, I know that I can help that patient, whether that's with a stent or getting them into the right chemotherapy guy or arranging Gamma Knife. I'll be on the phone that morning with Dave Lunsford in the neurosurgery center, arranging. And some of you might be wondering, well, why? Let's do some cases. I don't want to mess with admitting this, stage 4 patient. Well, that's short-sighted, very short-sighted, because that GI doc, that family, they're going to appreciate the fact that you took an end-stage patient and gave him 6 months of quality of life. And if you do it right, you might just garner him a few years, because we do have that capability. So you can't save everybody. And sometimes it's a simple matter of sitting with the family and holding their hand and talk about hospice, because that's important too. And it's going to come to that in some of your patients. You got to be there for that as well. We don't get to cure everybody, but at the same time, there's very few that we don't help. So when you say disease-based therapy, I mean the whole spectrum. Early stage Barrett's, well, we might just do a Nissen on them, or we might advise them about surveillance. Late stage Barrett's, we might do an MIE on it. We might go against the grain and do an operation for high-grade dysplasia. If it's 10 centimeters with multifocal high-grade in a 40-year-old that's on triple BID therapy anyway, we very well might do an MI, even though the dogma has shifted that we don't operate on high grade. And for the most part, that's a moving target. What is high grade? But we take them all, and we sort out what we do with that patient. Doing that, and in our line of business, we aren't beholden to the gastroenterology community, but we owe them a standard. We owe them the courtesy of a return call. We're not in the same boat as our cardiac colleagues, that if we don't keep the cardiologist happy, our entire referral pattern could go away overnight. When they call you and tell you to do a triple bypass, and by the way, we want you to leave the right coronary alone, we're going to stent that, and we don't think you should touch the valve. Well, you know what? That may be exactly what you're going to have to do if you want another referral from that cardiac surgeon or that cardiologist. And that's one of the main reasons I didn't go into it. Because I want to be the expert. I want to be the gatekeeper. I think I do know better what's best for my patients. And I will fight for them, and that's what happens. Now, you can have an open mind, you can discuss this, but I think you have to take the entire spectrum of that organ. You can't just be the surgeon. You've got to take the entire spectrum. You've got to know how to manage their PPIs. You've got to know how to talk to them about elevating the head of the bed, about lifestyle changes. You've got to be the one that talks to them. You know what? Your BMI is 46. You really think a Nissen is the only thing we should consider for you? Because maybe they'll do better with the RU. Whether you do the RU or whether you work together, and some of you know that I was at McGee the other day working with Anita Corcliss where we fixed the giant, and then she went on to do the RU. I'm capable of doing the whole thing. But when she calls me to do that, I don't criticize her and say, well, just send it up here, I'll take care of it. No, I go down there, do the giant, and the patient got a way better operation, probably on both ends of the spectrum, because she's probably way better at the RU than I am, and I'm probably way better at the hiatal hernia, but we recognize that, so we work together. And so that entire spectrum takes on a whole new meaning when you really consider if you want to truly build a center of excellence. And I think the same would hold for lung disease or mesothelioma. You're not going to operate every patient walks in the door. Now, research and teaching kind of goes along with this. As you're building a center of excellence, you hopefully will attract the attention of your program director, if you're not the program director, to say, hey, I'd like my residents to be on that service, whether that's at Mercy or whether that's at Presby, working with Ken Lee and the general surgery residents, or whether it's our own integrated residents. You know, we really think that by building these centers of excellence, the research goes along with it, the funding to do the research, the opportunities for residents in the lab, the attraction of others to you, and every paper that you publish doesn't go unnoticed. Marketing is a very multi-pronged tool. Every time I'm sitting in the clinic with a family and there's 3 or 4 family members, I've got my A game on. I'm marketing. Every time I go out and talk to a family and shake every hand in that waiting room, you've all seen me do that. I've got my A game on. I'm marketing. It's not that I want to be unfriendly to them anyway, but I'm there convincing them that this is the right place for them, that we care about their family member. And by the way, if you have a hiatal hernia, I'll talk to you next. I mean, that's how we do things around here. And that's why we build like we do, because many of these diseases are hereditary to a degree. You latch on to your patient and you very well might pick up their uncle or their son or whatever, because that's the way some of these diseases run. Investigation and adopt innovative new therapies. I guarantee that every one of our invited speakers is doing something in the area. We heard what Dr. Lyda was doing yesterday in a very related area, maybe not exactly adenocarcinoma, but at the same time adding to the knowledge of the field and building on it. So we have to adopt and innovate ourselves. When we first heard about robotics, I did one of the first lap Nissens with a Zeus. I was the PI on a national trial to do lap Nissens with the robot. Well, after the 5th patient was randomized, they came out with the articulating arms, and within the year, Intuitive was announcing the release of theirs, and the trial actually died, a kind of an ugly ending, because the technology couldn't keep up with the competition, and computer motion sold out, actually. So, but nevertheless, not every investment you make, not every trial you start is going to work out. When we did our first trial on minimally invasive esophagectomy, first multi-center trial, ECOG 2202, it started out with a group of investigators talking about MIE, and most of them had trained here or had been here. And it took us a good 7 years from that first meeting to roll out the first patient. And then we had to accrue, which took about 2 years, very fast accrual. And then we had to wait 40 months for ECOG to allow us to report the data because it was an oncology group. So that's how long. You got to be willing to have delayed gratification. It doesn't just all come out, immediately to support what you're doing. But over the course of the years, if you stay with it, the 3 A's and these things will pay off, I guarantee you. And that's the same if you look at Tom Gleason's aortic center. It's very, very similar. You just change the words, and it's a similar concept. And I'm sure Tom's as affable as I am on any given day. But we have slightly different strategies on how we get things done. But if you go into his clinic, it's pretty busy. Doesn't have any shortage of patients, and the referring docs and the patient families, I think, get treated very well. So, being the gatekeeper we've already talked about, I think that's a foreign concept to some of the residents. You've been learned to don't get dumped on. You've been learned to empty the service, to debulk the service over the weekend, get that patient home, get this patient out of there. It doesn't help me to push a patient out that's not ready to go home. It doesn't help me if you take the call from the referring doc and say, I avoided that dump. Yeah, well, thanks a lot, but that was one of my best referrals from Johnstown, and now he's going to call me Monday and say, Jim, I tried to send you that sick giant, and your resident said, well, maybe they should call 911 or whatever. I mean, we don't do that, and I'm not saying any of my current residents would do that, but you've got to be the gatekeeper. If you want to keep the schedule busy every morning and every clinic you go to, there's never an empty day, never. And that starts with that kind of concept. Non-operative management, all the things we do on each end of the spectrum for esophagus cancer has been chipped away at. Whether it's early stage Barrett's, now there's BARX. Well, we do BARX. There's EMR. Well, I do EMR. So does NetU. So does Omar. So does Ryan Levy. BARX. Yes, we do it. Phototherapy. Yes, we do it. In fact, we're the largest center for phototherapy in the world. We've done more phototherapy than anybody, even though it's not, our high volume procedure. We still do it. Stents. This group has placed more esophageal stents than any GI group in the country. Why? Because it finds its niche when you have this busy practice. There are always reasons to put them in. All these things, brachytherapy, surgical bypass becomes part of it. Hospice care, as I mentioned. EMR, when it became popular for esophageal cancer and for Barrett's, I was invited over to Germany to meet with Christian L., one of the very first pioneers in EMR for esophageal cancer. And I went to his lab, visited his unit, impressed by his studies, and he told me that first paper that he published on 100 patients that had a 4-year survival of 99% with esophagus cancer. He said, well, those were cherry-picked. We screened, and we say it in the paper. They screened 550 patients, excluded 450, and they studied 100. What they do with the other multifocal high grades with lymphatic invasion, they didn't go into that study. They got operated. That's how he was able to pull that off. But how do I know that? Because I was there meeting him. Then we invited him back here for a talk the next year. So you have to really, again, look at all spectrums. And at the later stage of esophagus cancer, what started happening? There used to be something called a surgical bypass. That's what I did when I was a resident. It was a little plastic tube about so long, and we had no delivery device. You actually opened the stomach, shoved it up into the esophagus surgically, closed the stomach, and then closed the laparotomy. Now, that's probably not great for a patient that's about to go on hospice care, right? But that's all we had to offer. And some of those patients were delighted because they were spitting their saliva in a cup. So you helped some of those patients, but you probably hurt a lot of them too. And then when expandable metal stents came out, phototherapy came out for palliation, for somebody like me, that was great news. It was really a big advance because we might think of esophagus cancer as, why is this stupid frailty score adding 20 points for the diagnosis of esophagus cancer? Anybody know? Anybody guess it? Why? 90% of esophagus cancer patients are dead within 1 year. You don't see them all the time. You see some of them, unfortunately. But if you just guess what's a bad number to put on an esophagus cancer patient, it's 20. You'll be right 90% of the time because they're frail, they're getting chemo, they're radiation, they're dying of their disease. So that's one of the shortcomings of the frailty score. When you have that youngish patient with a T1 tumor and you're thinking, this guy's walking a mile and a half, his frailty score is 44, and then you walk through it and you find out, well, he lost his appetite during chemo, or he this or that, he's 60-some years old, so he gets a score for that. He's got cancer, he gets 20 for that because he's a male. Next thing you know, you got a frailty score that's pretty ugly. Well, I think that's one of the shortcomings. What do we do about that? We study the frailty score, and we're planning to present our results, study our results, pick it apart, find the strengths of it, and build on it. Not just to sit back and complain about the frailty score. It has plenty of weaknesses, but there's a lot of merit to it too. So these ends of the spectrum of early stage all the way to late stage disease, you got to take those on. And you know Tom Gleason's clinic full of aortic patients. He's not operating on all of them. Some of them are being followed, waiting for... The aortic clinic is very much like a cancer clinic. You're waiting for the tumor to grow. You're really waiting for the cancer to grow, only it happens to be an aneurysm. And some of them are stable. Some of them grow fast. Some grow slow. Some you palliate. Some you put on a beta blocker. And some you take to surgery. Some you stent. So it's very similar to esophageal cancer conceptually. I was often told, and when I was rotating on vascular surgery, you only need about 100 patients. And, you know, what's a veteran with both legs? Pre-op. You know, so in other words, you've seen some of that. A vascular path really can have a problem, just like cancer patients. It's not unusual to have 2 or 3 cancers or to have a recurrence. And we can help them through those. We cure some, but we don't cure them all. So we got to go at both ends of the spectrum. Operative management, we've tried to be leaders in not just open surgery, but when we thought the time was right, we started doing MIEs. First one was August of 1996. There wasn't an IRB, there wasn't a wet lab, there was nothing except me putting it on the schedule and saying, oh, we're going to try an MIE today. Now, I had done hundreds of open esophagectomies. I had done hundreds of lapniscents, hundreds of what was called staging as part of a CALGB study. We started with staging esophagus cancer, VATS and LAP. But when it came time to make that change, we did the first 77 and published on them with a 0% mortality. Now, we knew that that wasn't going to last forever. And when we got to 222, there had been 3 deaths. So we had about a 1.3 or so percent mortality rate. And, you know, we're still there. We're down, if we do the Ivor Lewis and take all comers, we're just under 1%. That's better than anywhere in the country. And if you look at the Medicare database that's been published a few times, it ranges between 8 and as high as 23%. Now, centers of excellence doing good open surgery should be under 5%. But centers of excellence doing good minimally invasive have reported many times low single digit. No one's going to be 0. It's going to be impossible to be 0, but you should be able to get to low single digits. And how do we work on these problems of new operations? It's being at the forefront. It's like going to meetings like this, picking people's brains, traveling to China, see what Hai Quan Chen is doing, or traveling to Croatia and seeing what my friend Manish Iklovic is doing. I mean, there's just people all over the world that I've learned from that either come here to learn from me and imparted some of their knowledge, or I've traveled there as a guest speaker and learned from them. So the new approaches, you got to be open. I don't think we're going to be giving up MIE, but at the same time, you know, POEMS is a very good example of being open to new innovative therapies. POEMS came out onto the fore about 10 years ago by a guy named Inoue in Japan. And we all heard about it here, it was like, are you crazy? That is heresy. Putting a hole in the esophagus? Wait for the abscesses. Wait for the complications. We're never going to be doing that. I didn't say never. I said, well, I'm going to watch it and see. And then I met Inoue, and then I watched the videos, and then I met a few others. And Blair Jobe, one of my colleagues at the time, wanted to put somebody on the schedule. I said, how many have you been proctored by over in Japan? None. Did you go there and scrub with the money? No. How many have you done in the animal lab? Never. Okay. No, you can't do it. So it was simple. You know, we have an operation we can do minimally invasive. They go home the next day with 5 Band-Aid incisions. There's no way you're putting a hole in that guy's esophagus without some data and without some time. And I've set up animal labs, pigs, doing some acute, some chronic. And now, before we got to that point of getting that data all together, I did travel up to work with Jeff Marks. I did take his lab, did the cadaver lab and the pig lab. He did come here and proctor me in several, and then Lee Swanstrom came. And then we were off and running with our POEMS plan. And we had kept an eye on Inouye's data and others, picked people's brain. And you know, we haven't had a single 30-day mortality from a POEMS. And now Nechu's ready to roll out doing it. He's actually doing them alone, although he likes to do them on a day when we're both available. And I like that too, because I think the residents benefit from it. But soon he'll be doing them on his own, whether it's at Shadyside or whatever. And then we'll take the next person under our wing. So part of new technology is responsibility. Part of new technology is guaranteeing good outcomes. Part of robotic esophageal program is having Nechu recruited here to run that program, and even I don't put on an MIE robotically without Nechu in the room. Now, by now, should I be able to do it alone? If that was my thing, I would be doing it alone, because he's got me there. But you also have to know how to position the patient, get the ports in. There's lots of nuances to it that I haven't spent the time doing. Omar has. Ryan Levy has. So he's bringing along a cadre of people. We're not trying to stifle anybody from doing a minimally invasive esophagectomy. But out of a group of 22, how many can operate our 200 or 250 a year? Is it going to be 10? Probably not. We got about 4 maybe now that can do a minimally invasive esophagectomy solo. But on the other hand, if one of the new attendings gets a patient and wants to do it, the answer is yes, but you will do it with one of the senior surgeons. Period. When you have 10 or 15 under your belt and you want to see how far that surgeon can let you go, then we'll reassess your skill set and see if you're ready to go. In the meantime, work with me or Omar or Nechu or Ryan. We're not a group that's going to just say everybody can do POEMS. There just aren't enough POEMS. And by the way, it's been very difficult for Nechu to set up his schedule so that he's here on a day when I'm doing a POEMS. I think that there's easily room for 1 or 2 more attendings to be doing POEMS. And if you want to be doing achalasia, you better get on the POEMS bandwagon, because they are going to go that way, at least for their first go-round. And now we've got some out 5 years, and they are doing pretty well. And we're getting better at it. It doesn't take us as long. And our ability to get the clips on is pretty good. And now Veronica, is she here? She put the clips on the other day. I did a good amount of the dissection. And can she do it alone? Well, I think if she goes to a group in a year or so, she'll probably be the most experienced in that group. And if I were her, I would set it up where Nechu or I come and proctor, or Jeff Marks or Lee Stronstrom, so that you start out of the gate clean. You don't want to start out of the gate and having a death with a POEMS or a death with an MIE. I mean, first of all, it's a horrible feeling to lose a patient, but you'll own it. If that's the way you do it, you will own it. And you will get up in the mirror, look in the mirror every morning, and you can feel pretty bad about that case, and you should. So you should take an approach that's very similar to our groups and try to go down the road of new technology, study it. New technology, invite the expert here. Look at his video. New technology, gain expertise in the animal lab or in the cadaver lab. Now, you might say, what about you? You did your first MIE without an IRB. Yeah, but I had literally hundreds of cases. The first one was done in 4 hours. You might say, how did you do that? Well, I did it all myself. And she was 4'11". She weighed 98 pounds. She had high-grade dysplasia, had no previous surgery, and I did it laparoscopically and through the neck with a mediastinoscope. Never done either one before, but I had done a ton of lap staging, a ton of open surgery, and really it was pretty easy. And by noon, we had invented a new paradigm. And it was kind of exciting. Now, we took a lot of heat along the way, but the second case was 275-pound male with a prior open chole, 6'3". 13 hours later, I took a lot of heat at M&M for that. The guy did okay. He struggled in the hospital for a week or two, and a little different than the first one. And I probably should have set some exclusion criteria for the first, few hundred. But I took on that tough one, that very second case, because the first one went so easy. And I was young and full of piss and vinegar and thought I could do it all. And it was probably a mistake. I got him through it. And I think when enough is enough. And you'll see me convert today on occasion. You'll see me decide to do a coloesophageal anastomosis open. And you might wonder, well, we could do that. And I think we could. If we were doing a colon once a week, we'd be doing them minimally invasively. But we don't. Sometimes we go 2 or 3 months without one. And by the way, we did pull up a colon once minimally invasively and tore a vein about 22 years ago and watched a beautiful colon, one of the last conduits this patient had, turn blue right in front of our eyes. Because if you tear that vein, that's what it's going to do. You can't reanastomosis fast enough. It's dying right in front of you. And from that day on, I said, I'll never compromise a colon again. Stomach's a lot harder. You can get away with manhandling a slight bit, although you know the rule on the stomach, no touch technique. But on the colon, very, very fragile. And so we still open for colons. And I'm actually very proud of that. If we develop enough of a colon niche that we want to do them minimally invasively, we for sure could do it. But it takes a volume. What's the volume? Well, it's more than 10 a year. I don't know what the exact number is, but I know it's more than 10 a year. Again, disclosures. Now, how not to do it? Okay, this is a good call. I already talked about this. This is what happens to my young attendings, my residents. Oh, he's got metastatic disease. Send him to med-onc. Wrong answer. No, we'll take that patient. Why? Because I know there's a good chance he's got dysphagia or impending. I know there's a good chance if he goes to oncologist du jour, he's going to get someone that may not have ever treated esophagus cancer again. May give them gloom and doom and send them home without chemo for all I know. So we know that if we take that patient in, that we may be able to help. And there's the occasional liver met that we will operate. Younger patients, solitary liver met, we might give them chemo first or do the metastasectomy first. We might have Dave Bartlett RFA ablate that liver met. I've got a guy that's now out 15 years from a left lobe liver met who still sends me, some maple syrup every year from his little farm. And he was told he's got no chance. We resected him, treated him with chemo. And, that's an unusual story, but they're out there. So, the point is, he needed to see us. He needed to come to our clinic and for us to manage that patient. ER consult to the resident. Patient dehydrated, has advanced esophageal cancer. Call medicine. We didn't operate him, or we operated him a long time ago. Just call medicine. Wrong answer. That family's expecting to see us. They're down there saying, where's Dr. Luketich? Well, you're Dr. Luketich that day. You're taking him in, and if I need to go see him, then you got to drag me to see that family. And in most cases, they'll be happy to see Manny. They'll be happy to see you because they know you're part of a team that cares about them, that has expertise, and will take care of it. Those answers completely destroy the concept of disease-based therapy. You cannot ever give that answer. I don't care how tired you are. I don't care how busy you are. And some residents have learned the hard way on their service. All the 7,000 calls are recorded. All of them. So the day you make a flippant comment to a referral doc will probably be the last day you make that comment. You're not going to be fired over it, but hopefully you'll be educated, and hopefully you'll never make that comment. Because this is how you build a disease-based therapy service. You have to be open to taking every single patient. And that is absolutely for sure that the many, many patients we see are never going to get surgery. On the other hand, I came up to clinic once, maybe 15 years ago. Chris Fernando was running clinic, and I was in the OR, no surprise, right? And so I run up, and I said, okay, where's that giant? There's like an 88-year-old lady who was there with a giant, and I said, Chris had a funny knack of stuttering a lot when he was nervous. And he said, I said, when are we doing her? I told him to come back in 2 weeks. I said, you what? I said, isn't this the one that was having pain? And he said, yeah, but we put her PIs and we're going to do this. And I said, so I run down, catch him at the elevator, literally. Ran down, caught him at the elevator. I said, come on back, I want to talk to you. Sorry I was late. Sat down, talked to him. We admitted him to operate the next day. Now, one, I believe in what we're doing. So I'm not David Ratner at MGH, no longer there, I hear. No surprise to me. Any surgeon that spends his career figuring out formulas to not operate is in the wrong business. But that's what he did. He figured out all these exotic formulas mathematically on why you could not operate every giant paraesophageal hernia. And I think there's some merit to some of those patients. But a symptomatic, otherwise healthy 88-year-old who's taking care of herself at home is having pain every night, she's ready to strangulate. If you don't operate that patient, you made a huge error. Huge error. So we operated the next day, everything went fine. And you know what I said to Krish? I said, you know, Krish, we're in the business of marketing. We're in the business of selling our services. You either don't believe in our service or you couldn't sell a glass of water to a patient dying of dehydration in the desert. You let that patient walk out of this clinic without signing up, you're not a salesman. So you have to be a salesman. But to be a good salesman, as I was taught by my mentor, George Turner, when I was selling gym memberships in St. Louis, you got to believe in the product. He said, we have the best gym equipment in the city. You have to believe in yourself. I can offer training on weightlifting and conditioning better than anybody else in the city. The next thing is on you. Do you want to be in shape? Do you want to have what we have in this gym? Then you sign up for this membership today. And that's what we say to our patients every day. Do you believe in what's around you? This world-class healthcare system we call UPMC, the expertise of all of you in the room, the nurses, the doctors, the fellows, the attendings. The last part is up to the patient. You tell them all the things we have, and if you can't sell surgery to these patients, you can't sell a glass of water to a patient in the desert. So I really believe that a lot of what we do is marketing. But to be a good marketing agent, you have to believe in your product. And you have to develop your product to the point that you would sell it to your family. You got to believe that. If you can't do that, then you got to go back to the drawing board. Or recruit somebody that can do it. We didn't just roll out robotic esophagectomy. We recruited NetU because I didn't have the time to invest in it. And I didn't have the expertise to invest. So we did that. So anyway, that's what we do. We try to become experts in these areas like poems, etc. It was hard. Those first few poems were very difficult for me to do them through that little hole and work our way down. And we still struggle a little bit. It's a very foreign concept. But you know what's coming? You should see the new little robots they're using now. I mean, we watched a video with the robotic bronchoscope and one of the new prototypes. Literally, you're going to be down in the stomach with 2 arms and a camera. They're going to come out and you're going to operate on leiomyomas and small tumors and doing EMRs right under direct vision with this little robot. And it's going to be out soon. So the skills and the practice that you're developing with what we have today are clearly going to be preparing you for tomorrow. And when you guys hear about robotic stuff, and I tell you, and you hear me at meetings, I tell everybody, there won't be an operating room in the country, Tom, that doesn't have a robotic system doing something, for sure, in the next decade. You guys will be here in another decade, for sure. So if you don't invest some time in the new technology, you're way underestimating the future. It's like saying we're not going to have smart lights in every home, or that a nav system isn't going to be available in every car. The only reason why it won't be available in the car is because your smartphone will be so good at it, you won't even need it in the car. You're going to put your smartphone probably in a little dish, and it's going to take over the whole car. But you got to understand what the future is going to be, and the future is going to be more and more minimally invasive. 90% of patients that walk into your office that are in the age range of 60 years old, and they have an operable esophagus cancer or an operable lung cancer, and you give them all the options, 90% will choose surgery every time. You take that 85 to 90-year-old and you give them the same talk and the same choices, 90% will choose non-operative therapy. So guess what? If you as a lung surgeon don't offer RFA yourself or stereotactic radiosurgery, or as an esophagus surgeon, you don't offer EMR or some other therapy for them besides MIE or esophagectomy, where are they going to go? They're going to walk. And if you're the expert in those other therapies, they're staying with you, and you can believe in them. You can be that non-biased person because your disclosures cover the whole gamut. You do it all. You just offer the best therapy to your patient. You don't say, oh, we don't believe in robotics. Well, some patients are going to want a robotic approach. Maybe it shouldn't be you doing it, maybe it should be another guy. But I think that the future for technology changes, just like TAVR changed how we do aortic valve surgery. It's just the beginning. And we've seen it go from open choles with a 3-week hospital stay, NG tube in their nose for a week, waiting for them to tell you that they passed flatus before you took it out, to now outpatient gallbladder surgery that's done in a half an hour, right? That's just how the changes have taken place in my own lifetime. Just that dramatic of changes have occurred. And they're still happening. And you've seen some of them yourself. The robotic changes is dramatic. The per-oral endoscopic myotomy surgery is just the beginning of notes. I mean, they're taking out gallbladders through the vagina in some countries, for sure. Is that coming? It's here. It's here. And is every one of them going to be a winner? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There will be other ways to do them, but you have to be willing to think out of the box. What's our next talk, Ange? Raj, at 9-ish? Is that the plan? Yeah. So I love this talk because I really don't need any slides. And I could go on and on and on to talk about how you build an esophagus center of excellence, but I just wanted to impart some of the concepts to you and not to cover all my slides. That was just meant as if I ran out of something to say, which is pretty rare for those of you that are in the OR with me. There's always something to say, and I think I'm glad to see a lot of residents here today. It should be a lot of fun today, and I thank my faculty, both internal and my visiting faculty. It's great when you can invite faculty in that you actually remember from 1999 as a little fellow, kind of, you know, it's a little bit afraid of the OR, a little bit uncertain exactly what they're going to do, and now she's running her own service and is, you know, giving the oral boards later today and tomorrow, and you know, just makes you proud of what you can touch somebody a little bit and just might take off. You know, it's been a fun day having a fun couple of days having Ginny here, and of course Benny now is working across the street from us at AGH. You might think, oh wow, what an adversarial relationship that is. No, Benny called me before he even took the interview and said, hey boss, do I have permission to interview here? I said, well, first of all, you don't need my permission and you can do what you want, and I actually would love to see you there because right now they don't have a good thoracic surgeon and they need somebody, and by and large we're not going to be operating the same patients anyway. So we've kind of changed the paradigm of the relationship between AGH and UPMC in that I was over there and gave a talk earlier this year, and you know, Benny brings some of his residents here. He's been participating. I want you to know him by first name because if you have a high-mark patient we can't operate, I want you to call him. Absolutely. Because he can do virtually everything we do here as well over there. And for the first time, I can now tell my patients that are struggling with high-mark that can't come here that I've got a good solution for them. And I mean that all sincerely, that we should have a competitive healthcare system in town. So this is hopefully just the start of AGH turning it around. They've always had a decent cardiac service, but they've struggled with thoracic and foregut for a while. So anyway, thanks to my faculty, and I'll turn it over to Raj. Thank you.